Hello, friends, and welcome to Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden, and I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle Nga, and I've seen almost nothing.
And here we are tonight with our movie nights.
Woo-hoo.
Tonight, I don't know. It all depends on when I actually release this episode.
Surprise.
It's a surprise. Sometimes it's different every time. I was real good at the beginning there.
Is it your morning
releasing
commute?
them in the morning.
Is it your afternoon commute? Is it when you move from your desk to the couch to the desk again? Whatever it is that makes you feel good.
Exactly. But yes, we're here to talk about Carrie, that 1976 classic, directed by Brian De Palma, I believe, starring Sissy Spacek. Actually, it's like the starring in this movie is like all women, which I really appreciate. Starring Sissy Spacek, Piper Laurie, and Amy Irving. And based on Stephen King's novella, it's a pretty short book. It's jam-packed with a ton of stuff. First question is, did you like it?
First question, did I like it? I think the answer is yes. The question is, okay, first of all, I had never seen this movie before.
Shocking no one.
Shocking no one. But it was one of those things where I think that at least for most quote mainstream movies that I haven't seen, I've at least seen the big scenes, just kind of, because they've been memified or because they're online. Like, I haven't seen Jaws, but I've seen We Need a Bigger Boat, and I've seen, I haven't seen Titanic, but I've seen...
Oh my God, you haven't seen Titanic.
I haven't seen
3
Titanic,
hours of movie.
but I've seen the part where they're standing on the boat, and I've seen the part with the door on the water. I've seen...
Yeah, I'll Never Let Go, Jack. Yeah.
The relevant parts of the movie.
A lot of...
But this movie I had seen absolutely nothing of. I guess I should have guessed that there would be kind of a science fiction element to it because it is Stephen King, although I guess his works are kind of a mixed bag. I didn't know that telekinesis was going to play into it at all. I thought it was just going to be a movie about a girl who's bullied horrifically. And
I mean, and it is that. It is
that. And I was, because I just wasn't aware. I think the timing of the movie was surprising to me. Like, the big thing happens so close to the end of the movie. But, I think that slow burn is also pretty typical Stephen King, right?
Yeah. No, the slow burn, this is, there's a running joke about Stephen King novels that, like, his endings don't really live up to his beginnings, where, like, he's really good at building suspense. But the endings are sometimes a letdown. And I don't think that's true of every book. I don't think that's true of every story he tells. I think it happens in some of them. But, with somebody with a big anthology as Stephen King, I feel like that's bound to happen at some point.
No,
personally,
like they can't all they can't all be winners, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think the endings that I have been familiar with make sense to me in the context of their story. I think Carrie is one of the strongest endings of anything Stephen King's ever done.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's because it's also written. So I I listened to the audiobook.
That's reading. Don't let anyone say otherwise.
I know. I have this fight with some of my friends sometimes where it's like, I did read it. And they're like, no, you listened to it. And I'm like, well, it was unabridged. I heard every word.
Exactly. Anyway, don't let me get up on my soapbox about this. We'll be on it for 30 minutes.
No, I know. The audiobook was really great because it was also read by Sissy Spacek. And it had an opening of the foreword from Stephen King. So it must have been like a re-release of the book that, he talked about like a little bit of his inspiration for it and like where he got the idea for it. And it was a really nice insight. He'd heard a story about, this teenage kid who had like just started going through puberty. And like every time they were in the room, it was like a dark cloud, and like, there's that feeling of like something heavy in the air, like when they were in a bad mood. And he enjoyed this idea that like, the moods of a child could like shift and change and do these other things. And he also, I think he was really able to capture what it's like for a teenage girl in a very awkward stage of life of like just like when teenage girls hit puberty who aren't when the teenage girls who hit puberty aren't exactly popular, and they're not, they don't have any friends, and they're very quiet, and they don't, they're just weirdos. They're just freaks. They don't, and that's not even indicative of who they actually are. That's just like what high school has branded them.
Right, exactly. And they're still, they're trying to navigate that space and figure out who they are. And then, the added layer on top of it, and for Carrie specifically, is that she was just wildly unprepared for this entire situation.
She certainly was. So, yeah, so we'll get into different parts of the movie, but just to give a really brief synopsis, Carrie is a film about it's a coming of age story, but a coming of age horror story for this poor girl who is 16, 17.
Well, she's a senior, so
she's
a
senior.
Sounds right.
So if not already 17, definitely pushing 17. Because I know I graduated and I was 17. So I don't know. She might be in that range. And she gets her period for the first time. She's insanely made fun of by the other girls in gym class.
And they were kind of already making fun of her. This was just kind of the cherry on top of the sundae.
Exactly. She is the scapegoat for everyone else in her school. She has no friends. Her mother isolates her. Her mother is very, very religious, which isn't indicative of, okay, I guess now everything's going to be awful because her mother's religious. But the way in which her mother is religious is fairly traumatic for her.
Oh, yeah.
And abusive, genuinely abusive. And in the book, they don't shy away from that either, where it's just oh no, her mom flat out abused her. Basically, she has this burgeoning telekinesis power that gets slowly, she practices it, and she gets better and better with time, and she is able to understand it, and okay, my angry emotions do this, and but my happy emotions do this, and really try to flex it like a muscle. And that's actually something in the book where it's she'll literally say inside her own head, flex to make it work. Which I thought was interesting.
I kind of like that. I feel like we didn't really get to see her experimenting with it too much in this movie.
I know, which is annoying. I would have much preferred so I'll get to talking about the book in a second. But the culmination in the movie is because actions have consequences, a couple of the kids who were banned from coming to the prom decide to play a quote-unquote prank on Carrie, which is not a prank. It's just kids being mean and bullying her. But they put a bucket of pig's blood up above the stage and rig the king and queen vote so that she and her friend who asked her to the prom, but we'll get to that, rigged it so that they would win king and queen. And while they're up there, dump this bucket of pig's blood on top of Carrie.
Yep.
What they weren't counting on was her telekinetic powers of as soon as this happens. No, actually, I'm lying about that. It doesn't happen quickly. What happens is there's this pin drop silence in the gym, and then slowly all of the students start laughing at her. And it snaps something in her brain, and she traps them in the gym. And I'm pretty sure everybody who was in that gym is just dead. They're
almost
electrocuted,
everyone.
They're burnt, it's not pretty.
Yeah, I think the only character who survived because Miss Collins threw her out, thinking that she was in on the prank. But see, we're skipping to the end of the movie.
I know. No, but the whole culmination ends with her and her mother in a fight to the death, which I didn't fully expect. Even though the first time I watched this, I didn't fully expect that that's how it would end. And I can talk about the ending in the book, which is only slightly different. But it's a very chilling sort of representation of if you had a childhood like this, you can definitely see yourself in Carrie. And I would argue that at some point in everybody's life, they've had a moment where they have felt like this. Maybe they weren't treated as poorly as Carrie, or maybe they were. But everyone can at least sympathize with this character. Or if you're sympathizing with the bad guys, then you need to do some soul searching and come back around. Because there are some legitimate bad guys in this story.
Oh, there are so many bad guys in this story. I can't wait to get to it. But see, I think that, so speaking of understanding Carrie and kind of seeing, the audience feeling connected with her and seeing themselves reflected in her. My childhood and adolescent experience was nowhere near as terrible as hers, so I'm not in any way, shape, or form going to say that I truly understand what that character was going through. But I think that there was enough there that, see, when you asked me, do I like the movie, I enjoyed watching it. I'm happy that I've seen it. I don't know how soon I'm going to want to watch it again.
That's fair. And we should be clear, we did only watch the 1976 version.
Oh, yeah.
In our spare time, maybe we'll watch some of the remakes. But we only watched the first one because that's the one that's like the classic. That's the one that everybody references. Maybe we'll get around to the other ones. But it's also a Brian De Palma film, which is a very specific way of filmmaking. Like, I don't know if you happen to notice like the interesting close-ups or like how you might see one character and another character's reaction, even though you shouldn't necessarily see them in the same frame. A lot of things were, a lot of the cinematography is really specific to that director, which is also adds to it and in some ways takes away from it, I think, because you get so many perspectives that you're like, oh, okay. Cool. Great. Okay. Cool.
I mean, closer to the end of the movie, I enjoyed how disorienting that was because it was exactly as disorienting as going through that actual experience would be.
Exactly. I think he captures it really well, but you also have to like prepare yourself to watch it that way. I think I'm not overstepping where it's just like, it's a lot, but it's a lot. But continue.
Well, what do we do? Do we go to the beginning of the movie and the hell that is middle or high school sports?
The hell of high school sports.
I mean, the fact that it started at a volleyball game that means literally nothing, and yet everyone cares so much about it is like, yes, the quintessential high school experience.
Yeah. I mean, it establishes so much in the first few seconds, right? Because like Carrie is obviously I think she's in the position to like serve. And obviously the other team is like, just hit it at Carrie. She won't hit it back, Right. Like instantly calling her out as like the lowest in the pecking order of the school. And it's among specifically her peers because they have separate, they have boys and girls. So it's just like, well, okay, I guess here we are,
And they are immediately just nasty to her. Nasty over this, again, zero stakes PE game.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure they're just doing that because that's what the coach told them to do. Like their gym teacher was just like, play volleyball. You know what I mean? Like they're not even on teams. It's not even, it's nothing. But that does bring us to the shower scene, which is
weirdly
actually
sensual shower scene. Does the writer, someone think that adolescent girls have playful locker room towel fights?
Right? Run around topless, playing tag in the shower, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, that did feel a little male gazy. For all I know, Stephen King might have even written some pieces that way, where it's just like, that's not at all.
No.
None of that. Absolutely none of that. Like, I think, like, even the girls who would want to get in and out real quick, like, they never left a stall. Like, they came in fully clothed, they went in a stall, they came out fully clothed, and that was it. Like,
yeah.
Now, well, to be fair, I also don't know how private most high school showers are. I didn't have, like, my PE didn't really, we didn't have, like, hit the showers. Like, that's not how we did business.
Right. As I try to cast my mind
back.
That's what that silence was.
Try to remember if there were shower stalls during your PE gym class.
I'm like, there must have been, mostly because I know I would have felt wildly uncomfortable had there not been, and I don't remember feeling uncomfortable, so surely there were. Or maybe it was that terrible thing where you tell the kids to run around and then go to their next period stinky, and so be it,
Yeah. Maybe this is the part in the podcast, listeners, where we tell you that both of us, did not have a typical high school experience at all. So trying to explain this is a little bit like seeing a picture in a book and guessing what life is like for these people.
No, exactly. And I think that watching movies like this feels that way to me sometimes. You know, like when I was a little kid and I would go to the library and I would check out a book about kids who lived in the suburbs and had lemonade stands. I'd be like, "Oh, how lovely America must be," you know?
Every child has a lemonade stand in front of their house all summer long. They make that money.
This is what American children do, clearly.
They make that paper. I did actually have a lemonade stand with my friends. That is a thing I had. I don't remember how much we charged, but I feel like it was too much. My instinct is like, we probably charged too much for lemonade. But we were raising money for something, for like a toy we wanted to all play together. It was like the most ridiculous, like 80s action, like kids action movie you've ever seen. But yeah, like my performing arts high school, we didn't have standard gym. We had dance class.
Right.
So it's also like, after? I mean, so I personally did not.
Towel fights?
There were not locker room towel fights. I still don't know what that is. Okay, here's the also interestingly funny thing about going to a performing arts school. But maybe this is just me because I know I don't have, like, I, as a person, don't tend to have, like, issues with nudity as much. But the thing that going to a performing arts high school really taught me was when you're in the middle of a show, it doesn't matter if you have to change in front of your peers because you have to make your cue. So it's like you just change and then you get ready to go back on stage and that's it. Like, people weren't getting naked per se, but it was like, people were just like tearing off clothes and putting on other ones and then going back on stage. And it's like, it didn't matter. Like, you know, like we didn't have fun with it. It was like a job, which is not the same as a towel fight.
No, certainly
also,
not.
Who has the time? Don't you have to get to your next class? Like, I assume you have only a certain amount of time. You know, maybe I should ask my mom, who went to a fairly suburban high school. Maybe I should just be like, how long was, like, did you have PE? And then was it like, did you have like 10 minutes to like, shower everything and like throw on clean clothes and like, 12 girls fighting for like 3 showers? Like, what are we
and
even?
2 towels.
Exactly. What are we even talking about?
Oh my gosh. Okay, the shower scene. We got caught up in the shower scene.
I know. We're avoiding talking about it because it was so dramatic. The book,
it was terrible.
I will say this. So the book opens with this scene. Or, well, I'm sorry.
With the volleyball game or like with literally
Carrie,
her period starting?
Yeah, with Carrie having her period start.
Oh.
And it either, I shouldn't quite say that because honestly, I listened to it a bit ago, so I may not be remembering it correctly. But it, like, the narrative of the story. So let me say this real quick. The book is really short. It's written really well. It's interspersed the narrative of the story because there is like a narrative, by different people's perspective part of the book. But then there's also like direct quotation accounts from like the people who survived the attack or like the studies that happened on it after the fact and like talking to other, professionals in the telekinesis field and like trying to understand the events interspersed throughout the book. So like you obviously know that like something is coming and you may not necessarily know what it is, but the narrative flows really nicely. And the narrative for the shower scene is actually from Sue's perspective, who is a character who's like, I don't even know why I started chanting "Plug It Up." I don't know why.
Right. I mean,
it just happened.
She was chanting it because everyone else was chanting it.
She was chanting it because other people were chanting it. And in the movie, she like in the movie and the book, she is one of the more popular girls. And she's not the bad one. She's the quote unquote good one.
Right.
She's the one who's trying to do good by Carrie. But like in the movie, she's like opening up, where they keep the pads and she's throwing the pads at Carrie also. Like she's really vehement about it.
Yeah.
And it's awful because it's obviously Carrie doesn't understand what's happening because the first thing she does is like run to the other girls of like help because she thinks she's bleeding out.
Screaming and crying and grabbing at them. I mean, it's a wild reaction that I didn't quite understand until we find out that Carrie's mother is so religious she just didn't even tell Carrie about periods because somewhere, some part of her hoped that if she raised a, quote, sinless child, then her kid would never have her period.
I would almost be like, it's too extreme, and it's like almost so extreme it's funny, except I know that people are out there that exist who believe these things.
Yeah.
And I try not to come down hard on anyone's belief structure, but I'm also like, but you know, every woman, uterus having people, will eventually get their period.
Right.
And if they don't, something's wrong. Like, it's not about God. There, I said it.
No.
I don't know about...
And that's the thing. Like, at the end of the day, a lot of people are Christians. A lot of people have similar belief systems, and not all of them abuse their children, right? So this is just the way in which the mother chose to express herself, right? She's taken her religious beliefs, warped them, and then is abusing her child with them.
And this is arguably generational trauma because I have no idea how her mother raised her. In the book, it is sort of alluded that like her upbringing was not the greatest upbringing either. And like the man she eventually, quote unquote, falls in love with, she's not even supposed to have sex with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like she has visited this trauma upon her child is the point I'm trying to make. Right.
And, you know, it ends there because they both get dragged into hell. But we're skipping ahead to the end of the movie.
I know, I'm sorry.
Her mother is literally, like, hitting her over the head with this religious book and making her repeat nonsense from it that is just awful. And then drags her kicking and screaming into this dark closet to go pray because...
With the scariest crucifix I think I've ever seen.
Yes. And
with this Jesus on the cross with some light up eyes.
With the light up eyes, but also, you know, they brought it back around, I guess, at the end of the movie. But as soon as I saw that Jesus statue, I was like, did Carrie stab the Jesus that many times? Like, why is the Jesus stabbed so many times? Because it was once in the side, y'all, and once in each hand. That's what it is. It's once in the side and once in each hand.
It's like, it's specifically arrows. It's specifically these arrows that were flung into Jesus.
Right. So I was like, very interesting.
I don't understand. Like, I also don't understand what, like, we never quite find out what sect of Christianity they are. Yeah. Like, I don't know where it falls. So I'm just like, I don't know. For all I know, they could sell a crucifix like that. I have no idea. And the props guy was like, let's use this.
But again,
the time Jesus made his way through the cowboys of the Old West and died for their sin. I don't know. I got nothing. I'm sorry. I interrupted your point. Please continue.
No, I don't think that there was a point. The point was that her upbringing and her mother are terrible and abusive.
Yes. Well, yeah. And so the end of the shower scene is the gym teacher coming in and like trying to shake her because she's totally hysterical.
Okay, but also like how many abusive characters are in this movie? When the PE teacher came out, Miss Collins, she like grabs Sue by the shoulders and is like, "What are you doing?" And then she fully tries to calm Carrie down by slapping her across the face, and it is not the first slap that happens in this movie. My notes just say this PE teacher needs to be written up for 6 different things.
Right? Right? So,
yeah,
okay, so here's a big difference.
1976. Is that just like a thick layer of 1976?
I have to assume so. Here's the biggest difference between that moment and this is the first character difference I noticed in the movie is that this PE teacher in the book, as soon as she slaps Carrie, she instantly regrets it. She's like, I shouldn't have done that. That was not a thing I wanted to do. Now, it calls back, like Stephen King uses that as a sort of callback to like, I'm trying to figure out how to explain. It's like how kids who are picked on as much as Carrie is, it's almost like this prey animal that you can't help but attack.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And that's not to say, like, like the fact that she feels bad about it is interesting about her character because it's like, oh my God, I don't even know why I did that. It's just like, but it's Carrie White. It's Carrie White. And she's like, she is so easy. She's an easy target.
I think
and
that
I
that's a
smacked
good.
her. You know,
I think that that's a perfect way to explain it. And in the movie, Miss Collins does say that to the principal when she's in the principal's office smoking her cigarette in 1976.
in 1976.
A little bit later, she says, and the worst part is, I understood how the girls felt. You know, like I kind of wanted to hit her too, because Carrie is having this wild, just almost inhuman response to her period. And everyone is just shocked by it. And you're right, gets irrationally angry at her because it's just so easy to. It is so easy to.
She's an easy target. She's an easy target. And the reason I call that like not a, it's not really it's like a character divergence because she slaps another kid like 2 scenes later. And I'm like, you didn't.
The mean girl, Chris.
Yes.
Okay, so Miss Collins, we have to talk about Miss Collins. We're on her anyway.
Okay,
so Miss Collins, quote, saves Carrie from this situation, which, you know, actually she does actually get the girls to stop throwing sanitary products at Carrie and yelling, plug it up. So I guess she saved Carrie from the situation. Gets her sent home, whatever, fine. And then proceeds to gather all of the girls who were involved in the gym and just rips them a new one, you know, is trying to explain to them how terrible it is, what they did. And that, I think, is when Sue kind of really starts to internalize that message and starts feeling bad for Carrie and decides that she wants to do something nice for her. But at any rate, Miss Collins then gives them a week of detention. And detention with Miss Collins is just a rough afternoon of exercise.
Yeah. Which they're all weirdly good at. Like they're all able to do those crunches. Girl
who was who was like a little behind in terms of the beat.
That's true, yeah. No, there was one girl who was definitely phoning in those push-ups, but like all the rest of them were like, man, it was like military school or something. They were really banging them out.
Like very fit until Chris cracks. Refuses to continue. And Miss Collins slaps her across the face. That's slap number 2.
It's like 15 minutes of exercise, I guess, was too much for her or something.
Yeah. I mean, there's an unfortunate amount of physical assault in this movie.
Yeah. No, there certainly is. I mean, like, I feel weird giving a spoiler alert warning for that, but like there's a lot of physical assault in this film. And it happens all over the place. It's student against student, teacher against student, mother against child. Like it's a lot.
All over it, up and down.
Yeah. So in the book, both Sue and Chris are banned from the prom. Just flat out.
Yeah.
They're just flat out banned from the prom. Now, Sue is the one to go to her boyfriend and like talk about this thing. And she's kind of remorseful about it, but like she doesn't really know what to do. And her boyfriend, Tommy, is this really like genuinely sweet guy who tells her this story about like, you know, there was a bully in my school when I was growing up too. And like, because he's like a couple years older than her. Like, obviously she's a senior in high school, but like I know in the movie they make them in the same grade, but like, he was meant to be a little older. I think Billy's also meant to be a little older than Chris, but like he tells her the story about how, you know, like I always regret not, you know, sort of coming to the aid of this kid who constantly got picked on by this bully and it sucked. But like, you know, I didn't get the chance because by the time I was like old enough and they're like mentally mature enough to do it, he was already gone and out of the school and like I never saw him again. And Sue sort of internalizes that and is just like, you know, I think what would make Carrie happy is if you asked her to the prom. And he's kind of like, what? And she's like, well, I can't go. Right. But like, you know, I think, oh no, that's what it is. It's like he's a grade or 2 higher. I can't even remember. It's almost like he's repeated a grade, but like they are in school together. Like he knows Carrie. Like, and he's never been mean to her. And, you know, it's like Carrie's just kind of like there for him, but it's not like he hates her and he's never made fun of her. He's, you know, he's not that kind of guy. And he thinks about it and he's like, you know what? Yeah, I think I would like to go to prom with Carrie. I think she'd really like that, you know, and he does ask her out. And I think in the book it's even funnier because in the book it's like she kind of makes this sound and runs away. Like it's this,
I love that.
you know, it's
I
this
think
like
that narratively makes a lot more sense than what happened in this movie.
doesn't it?
And, well, you know, the fact that Sue was not allowed to go to prom and then told Tommy to ask Carrie to, yeah, like narratively that makes a lot more sense. I think that's why, that and my distrusting personality are why I don't think it was until the last like 6 minutes of the movie, whenever all of the violence and the revenge started, that I really believed that Sue and Tommy weren't about to
right. Do something else. Yeah.
Do something. Like I really thought it was going to happen. Like when Sue first starts setting this whole thing up and invites Tommy over and tells him to ask Carrie out, I was very pleased to see that the first thing Miss Collins did when she found out about that was interrogate Sue
pull
and Tommy.
both of them aside.
I'm like,
I know.
Yeah, they're up to something. They're up to something. You know.
Yeah, like I can't tell you not to invite someone to prom.
Yeah.
But but what are you planning? You know, we're not planning anything. We just want her to have a nice time. And
I'm like, come on, no one would do that. No one would do that. But you won't get to go to prom if Tommy goes with her. And I'm like, first of all, what kind of rule is that? Is that a rule?
Yeah, you have
prom?
to have a date.
What's that? Okay, people, listeners who have been to a prom, is that a prom rule? Because I have not been to a prom.
I did go to a prom, but you didn't, as far as I know, you didn't have to have a date. I think we all felt internal pressure to have a date because a lot of us were bringing dates. That didn't mean you had to have a date.
Right.
Because we also bought our tickets to prom. Like we had our prom off-site because a lot of proms in New York City don't usually have them on campus at the school.
I mean, that makes sense.
Because it's like you don't always have enough room. You know, like a lot of schools are really large and you'd have to like, you know, like it's not like you have the space of a giant gym to have your senior class have prom there, you know. So a lot of our proms are actually off-site, like somewhere else in an event space. So we had to buy tickets to our prom.
Oh.
Which our prom was expensive. Well, I thought it was expensive. For 2001, I thought it was pretty expensive. It was like $80, I think, a ticket.
Okay, that is expensive. For 2001 high school prom.
Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot.
Like, what are we paying $80 for? Punch?
Right? I'm pretty sure it was the space that we were in. But we're getting off topic. But actually, that I wanted to bring up that because it's this is a good way that Stephen King is able to show. Remember, like there's that narrative through the book. So obviously you get some of the internal struggle that Sue has. But then you also have Sue eventually writes her own memoir about the event. There's like a hearing, like to try and figure out why this happened.
Oh,
like,
that makes sense.
Like, who's to blame, you know? And and a lot of people lump Sue in with Chris and Billy because they're like, well, why on earth would you ask your boyfriend to go with it? Like, obviously you were in on it. And she has to sort of fight to be like, no, I was just genuinely wanted her to have a good time. Like,
poor Sue, because that is a difficult position to put yourself in. I wouldn't believe her. I would not believe her if I were a teacher in that situation. I'd be like, no, absolutely not.
I think the movie portrays that really well because like you don't know who to believe, right? Like you don't really know. You don't really know if there's going to be this secret thing that maybe there's something off camera we haven't seen. Because like you see Chris and Billy being these terrible, horrible people. Do we have to talk about Chris and Billy?
I don't know. I kind of just don't want to. Like, what if we didn't? I mean, no, we can. But like, no, but because you're right, because they like the way that they alternate between the scenes. It's like Carrie is having a lovely evening and getting ready for not. All of her evening is lovely because of her mother.
I know.
But, you know, Carrie is getting ready for the prom and she's so excited and she's trying on makeup for the first time and she's sewing her dress and she was so pretty.
She was
and then
so pretty.
she goes, so pretty. And then she goes and she's dancing with Tommy. But then this entire time this is happening, they're showing Sue, like, checking her watch, getting up from the dinner table, going to the gym. And you're kind of like, all right, so clearly Sue has a job. I still think it's weird that Sue would want to be there if she didn't have a job. See, narratively still doesn't make sense. But anyway, so Sue gets there, and it isn't until Sue is holding on to, some scaffolding around the stage, finds the string attached to the bucket and starts backing up, trying to figure out where that string is leading to, that I realized, oh, she's really not in on it.
Yeah.
But again, I think that was maybe the last, what felt like 8 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, no, and they're able to walk that line really well because I think you also don't know if Tommy's going to all of a sudden start laughing at her, right? Like,
yeah.
And Tommy is just this genuine dude who just genuinely wants to show her a good time. I did think it was kind of funny that he like lets her kiss him.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what? For him, it was basically a peck, right? Because it was just a very
but for her, it was like her first kiss. Like
lips
it was
closed kiss.
Yeah,
and in front of the church kiss, and
that's exactly the kind
that's exactly what kind of kiss it was.
Yes.
Wait, but I kind of want to go back to that laughing because I want to hear your take on it, and I don't know if there's an official quote take on it. Because, after the bucket of blood falls on Carrie's head, you're right. There is like that pin drop silence. And then the screen gets all wibbly and it looks like you're looking through a fly's eyes, because you can see multiple things going on at once. And then all of the students and teachers start laughing at Carrie. And that's kind of where I'm sure there were people in the audience, in the, not audience, but I'm not sure what to call them.
in the
crowd.
Gym?
I'm sure, like Norma was laughing right away. I'm sure that other kids started laughing too. But Carrie was seeing Miss Collins laughing. Carrie was seeing like the principal laughing. So I couldn't tell whether everyone was actually laughing at her or whether that was a trauma response and she was imagining everyone laughing at her.
This is a good question because in the book, it's also not terribly clear. There's definitely a silence that follows.
Yeah.
And I think it's that kind of silence where, like something happens and maybe it's only like 30 seconds, but it feels like an eternity. Yeah. And I like that the movie like drags that out, that like you don't get the immediate reaction because it's like everyone's so shocked that this happened.
Yeah.
And then in the book, it's sort of like, and then there was one laugh and then there was 3 and then there was 10. And it was like a wave of laughter. Yeah. And I don't know exactly if everyone was laughing, but I think enough people were laughing.
Yeah, I mean, likely it was both, right?
Yeah.
Like, likely there were people laughing and she imagined everyone was laughing. I think that the movie made that obvious because it panned over to Miss Collins, and Miss Collins would not have laughed in that situation.
Right.
But she was laughing in Carrie's perspective.
I think so too. And I think we get a lot of quick shots where you're not necessarily sure if the people she's seeing laughing are actually laughing, which I think they did a good job with that. Like, a kid who's getting picked on and made fun of so much. Yeah. They internalize that to just be like, everyone is laughing when it's like, maybe it's just the real jerks in class with a couple of nervous people chuckling because they don't want to look,
right.
like
Exactly.
the outcast.
Which, listen, like, isn't great. It's not great to be a bystander in that situation, but it's also, morally and ethically better than being Billy.
Exactly.
Do we talk about Billy? How about we just talk about Billy and Chris just very quickly right here in the middle, and then we can pivot to something else.
And pivot to something else. So I can sum up Chris and Billy very easily because they are slightly different than they are in the book. Okay. But Billy is sort of in the movie, Chris is portrayed as just this like straight up mean girl who likes to play tricks, who likes to say things that maybe not are necessarily true, who likes to she likes to stir up stuff. Yeah. And Billy comes across as this like somewhat insecure dude who like takes out his aggression on the people and things around him.
Right.
Usually
Like maybe
Chris.
he's older than them and he dropped out of high school
Yeah.
and that's why he's so sensitive about her calling him dumb.
It's really interesting because in the book, it's a little more like Chris wants mean things to happen to Carrie, right? Like it's her idea to do this pig's blood thing. It is entirely her baby. But the thing of it is like they talk like Stephen King has this great chapter or so where he talks about how like the first time Billy and Chris have sex, Chris is like, like it was a little rougher than she expected and she wasn't sure, like she wasn't sure if she liked it, but like, like she had sort of that questioning moment about it. And then when they actually go to get the pig's blood, it's that same kind of energy of like he's just so aggressive about it. And he's so like, he's the one who jumps in with the hogs and slits their throat. And he's like, well, we got one pig. Like they didn't do this in the movie, but they get 2 pigs worth of blood. Like he goes around looking for a second one. Like it is brutal.
Yeah.
It's not great. It's not great, kids. But he is portrayed in both, I think, as this, like, and in, and in 30 seconds, he's going to become a wife beater. You know what I mean? Like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not great.
He hits Chris multiple times in this. He's very pushy with her. He's violent and kind of sadistic.
Yeah. It definitely comes across in that. I think it encapsulates a lot of like how we sometimes make like violent men attractive to women, where it's just like, I don't know why we do that, but that happens in our society sometimes where it's like, this feels like a mistake.
Yeah. Well, so I'm hearing that there's a difference though in Chris because whereas, it's sounding like there was some hesitation in her character in the book. In the movie, there is no hesitation in her character. Like she is in it with him. She's excited when he takes the hammer to the pig. She's arguing with him over who's going to get to pull the rope in the bucket. It was like the whole thing was her idea to begin with.
It's a very Bonnie and Clyde thing in the movie. And in the book, it's definitely like she comes to Billy for the heavy lifting, but like not necessarily I think she doesn't expect him to enjoy it as much as he does. Which is I think an interesting take on those two characters, right? Because like you can be the person who has the bad idea, and then when you look at somebody carry it out and you're like, oh,
ooh, you're enjoying that more than I thought you would.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, in the movie, it's definitely much more Bonnie and Clyde thing. And like they're giggling and smirking at each other under the stage. In the book, there's like an electric thing where they can like press a button and it'll drop. And they're not in the building. They're actually just outside of the building. Like they're very close by, but they're like right outside, like the back wall, like near that hill. And they're like waiting for the school song, which always plays when they crown king and queen.
Okay.
And so they're waiting and waiting and waiting for the school song because in the book, okay, so this is another hilarious moment because they're waiting because they think they missed it. There's no rigging, as far as I know, of the voting in the book. They collect all the votes, and then at first, Carrie's like, we should vote for somebody else because it seems weirdly self-serving to vote for herself. So the first time they vote for somebody else, they count up all the ballots. They have a tie.
Oh.
And they send out a tiebreaker for just these two couples. And then Carrie is like, okay, well, now we can vote for us. This seems,
okay. But then how does that make sense with their whole pig blood plan? Because how would they know that she was going to win if they didn't rig the vote?
I think it was if she's going with Tommy, Tommy and Sue were like shoo-ins for king and queen. So I think they're just kind of banking on the fact that like Tommy will push it over the edge.
Okay.
Now, I may be wrong. I may be misremembering it. But like there was definitely like a tie and they had to go back and vote again. And on the ballot, it's like Tommy and Sue is crossed out and written in as Carrie White. Like, it's a very obvious, like, everyone assumed Tommy was going to come with Sue. It's just so funny because they're out there, they're like, did we miss it? No, they didn't. They always play the school song. You know what I mean? Like, ever since the school had a prom, they play the school song. No, we're fine. And like they're paranoid because they're not seeing anything and they're not hearing anything. And when she presses the button, there's like no sound. It's that quiet. And she's like, oh God, maybe it didn't work, like, so she keeps pressing it. And then she starts hearing the laughter and she's like, yeah, we got her, like, and it's a really interesting, like, they're removed from it. Now, I know why they did this in the movie, because you can't do that in a movie.
Right. And there's something to be said for just the utter delight that you see in Chris's face as she's watching and thinking about how awful this moment is going to be for Carrie. Yeah. That's super cinematic. What's the word I'm looking for?
Cinematic?
Cinematic, yes.
It is. It's this, you have that sense of urgency because they're sitting under the stage and they're waiting for it. And they know exactly what's happening. They even see them as they come up the stairs. Like it's a really good like horror moment.
And the alternating music in that moment was amazing. Like when you see it from Carrie's perspective with like the blue light and her hair and she's walking up to the stage, there's that very prom music, and then it kind of pans to Chris's face and it's like that Psycho music that's going on in the background.
Yeah, they borrowed a lot of Psycho sounding. There was a lot of Psycho sounding things, which I think added to the suspense of it. But at the same time, I was like, did you borrow that from Psycho?
Kind of sounds like they did.
Did you cite your
sources? I liked the alternating music in that scene. I think it was fun.
Yeah, no, it was. Oh, God, do we have to talk about Mrs. White?
I mean, we basically already did. She's terrible. She's a child abuser.
She's terrible. She's the worst.
And we're not saying religion is terrible, because a lot of religious people are not child abusers. This person was a child abuser. And at the end, she died and she looked like the Jesus statue, which I guess was symbolism? ?
So I will say, so here's how we can kind of talk about her without talking about her. Her character, the characters of Carrie and her mother were slightly different in the book, but very, very similar. Like the abuse is still there. There's definitely a lot of power dynamic where her mother has all the power and has obviously had all the power for the entirety of Carrie's life. And like her mother has, as I mentioned before, like has this thing of like Carrie's father, there was this big conflict of like they weren't supposed to have sex. They weren't supposed to really be attracted to each other, which I still don't understand, but whatever, it's fine.
Yeah. And it was like, I mean, the way they framed it was, in the movie at least, was they had sex on their wedding night, which they viewed as sinful, and they had given in to sin. And then the one other time they had sex was when Carrie was conceived. Right. And that scene when her mom is telling her all of that was just so awful.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, it's awful in the book too.
Yeah, when she's explaining to Carrie that she is basically sin and Satan personified, because she is the seed of Satan and sin, and you're just like, ah!
And she didn't even know. Okay, so in the book, it was almost like she didn't even know she was pregnant. Like she didn't even understand what that was. And she has Carrie at home, and like she doesn't, like she didn't even go to the hospital. Like she basically took like a kitchen knife and helped herself have a baby. Like, it's insane. Goodness. Carrie was brought up essentially being the embodiment of sin for her mother for a very long time. Now, as a child, and Stephen King likes this trope, which I appreciate because I also like this trope. But as a child, Carrie apparently had like a temper tantrum. Yeah. And made rocks fall from the sky. So when that happened, it was something that was extremely traumatic. And I'm sorry, friends, I don't remember the exact pieces to get her there. And she literally shut herself off from that completely. Like there was so much pain and so much hurt. She completely forgot she could do that. And so years later, when she gets her period, it's like the floodgates kind of open for, sorry for the, I guess, pun intended, whatever. But like all of a sudden she can do this thing. And she like I said, she practices it and like does it a little bit at a time. And like we get little instances of it more in the book than we do in the movie of like the interaction with her mother. And like her mother finding out about her period and like does have that like smacking her in the face with the book and all of that. Like that definitely happens. She's also like sewing something and like she turns off the sewing machine while she's across the room to like flex her power. And she does this around her mother as like gentle warning signs, I think, because I think deep down Carrie doesn't want to hurt her mother, like not initially, you know, like all abused children who don't.
I think even through the ends, like it's kind of one of those terrible things where she knows that her mother is wrong and she knows that her mother is mistreating her, but she can't help but love her mother because her mother is her family.
Exactly.
And, you know, because Carrie has the life she's lived, the only person who's ever really paid attention to her and, quote, cared for her in any way, other than maybe Miss Collins, but...
I mean, that's a big maybe.
Yeah,
I feel like Miss Collins is more looking for a reason to punish the other girls for being bullies than she actually is for... I mean, I do think Miss Collins, like in the movie, is really genuinely cares about Carrie and like wants her not to be a scapegoat her whole life, you know?
Yeah.
But I at the same time, I feel like Miss Collins is like, just give me a reason to punish these kids. Like, they're just mean bullies and they need to be punished. But like
she's not wrong.
The tension sort of builds between Carrie and her mother. And it's this like tug of war as to who has the power and who doesn't have the power.
Yeah.
And
I love that.
Yeah, I do too. It was really interesting. And it was like this in the movie and in the book. And it was like, her mother starts to realize that like, oh my God, my daughter is actually powerful and like she is afraid of her. And it has this element after the incident in the gym, like she comes home. And this is the same in the book. I think that's when like her mother has that whole like pouring out of like, this is what happened to me. And I thought I could shield you from all of that. You know, like if I kept you good and pure and you would never have to deal with any of that, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, but that's not how life works, but it's fine. It's not fine. None of it's fine. She does attack Carrie and Carrie also defends herself in the book. Like in the movie, it's definitely this like triumphant sort of thing where she like full on attacks her mother, right? Like in this fugue state.
In a fugue state, ton of different kitchen implements, you know, mimicking the arrows that are stuck into her Jesus statue.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think I agree with you. Fugue state, because the instant she realizes what she's done, she's screaming, running into her mother's arms, like trying to pull her mother out of the kitchen, because then all of a sudden the house starts imploding and is dragged into hell.
So I think this is where the director, well, I guess it would be the writer of the movie, I don't know, whoever adapted it, I think this is where they put those stones falling from the sky. I think they put it in here because in the book, she herself, it like wanders out of the house and she becomes this sort of emotional black hole for the people around her. And like everyone in town just has this like, all they can think is like Carrie White. And they start like walking around town in a daze. And like she has this like hold over everybody. And it's strange and bizarre, right? Like it doesn't make much sense. But a lot of people will just be like, I don't know what to tell you. I crashed my fire truck into a wall and all I could think of was Carrie White. I don't know what to tell you. Like,
so does it not end? Does it not end the same way with them being pulled together into hell inside the house?
Carrie basically is in shock over the fact that she's killed her mother and she wanders the streets and she's been stabbed. Like she was stabbed. So she's like walking around basically just losing blood. At some point, somebody like gets close to her and like tries to stop the bleeding. Like they try to help her, but they can't. Like her telekinetic powers like just extend beyond everything. And it's like all anyone can think of is like, well, I know Carrie White is right there. Like Carrie White is right there and she's grieving and she's upset. And like, I think Sue even like ends up nearby her because I don't actually remember what Sue was doing the entire time that prom happened in the book. I might have checked out for Sue in the book. Well, because she's just this nice girl who kind of
something irrelevant. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
I feel bad for like her later life, but during the story, she's kind of not that important. But she ends up like near Carrie towards the end, and she like feels her die. Like she
Yeah.
follows her into the abyss mentally. Like she's just like, oh my God, I can't breathe. Like I can't breathe and my heart stopped. And it's like she is Carrie. And for like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something, for however long it took Carrie to die, the whole town feels this with her.
Yeah.
And it's intense and awesome, but also like it's a book ending.
Yes,
Like,
it is a book ending.
You cannot show this. Like, you cannot show this in a movie. Like, I appreciate that they didn't try. Like,
Yes.
just creating, like, the fact that this house drags them both to hell, you know, like, the fact that they were just sort of caught in this terrible thing that they were never really going to escape, I think is a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Or,
And then
or at
poor
least
Sue
from a cinema.
never really escapes either.
Exactly. I know. From a cinematic perspective.
That hand's popping out.
I know.
Scariest part in the movie.
I mean, that is like the only jump scare, so that makes sense. There aren't a lot of like, okay, did you think this movie was scary? I know we're kind of over time, but like, I feel like this movie wasn't scary so much as it was just like intense.
No. I completely agree with you. I don't think that this was a horror movie in the traditional jump scare or, you know, Asian ghost sense.
I will go with you on that, yeah.
I think that this was the brand of horror story that sits with you, right? Because horrible things have happened, right? And it's the sort of thing where, I don't know, it's a horror movie because it's taken everyday things that a lot of people experience, high school, bullying, an overbearing parent, or an abusive parent, and then just blown them out of proportion, made them big and extravagant and fantastical, and then that's scary. That's the horror. That's the movie.
That's the horror. It's I also like that it has that kind of righteous anger of like, what if you could fight back? Like what if you could actually fight back against your bully? You know, like and for most of the movie, Carrie doesn't want to do that. You know, like Carrie's just sort of interested in like living her life, man.
Yeah. Going to the library, figuring out what's going on with her telekinetic powers, talking back to her mom finally, now that she has her telekinetic powers.
Yeah. I like the movie in the weirdest possible way because it's like, you're right. It's like, it's not like I can sit down and watch this movie over and over again. Absolutely not. But it definitely taps into a part of me that like, yeah, I wish I could have, you know, stood up to the bullies I had in school too, for sure. Like if I could have made something fly across the room, I definitely would have made like some books fall on a bully's head, like 100%. I would have done that.
Pulled out a rug from underneath them so they fall over or something.
Yep.
You know, like not in a really harmful way, just like a little bit of a
make
tumble.
them trip in gym class so they land on a mat, you know. They're fine. They landed on a mat. It's fine. And then burn down the school. No, I'm kidding. No.
Poor Miss Collins. Never. Did Miss Collins deserve that?
I don't think so. I think it was just like, you know, the book had this sense of like, we all failed Carrie White. Like,
yeah,
you know, this sense of like the community let her down. Like she had no respite. Like this was, you know, this was all of our faults, you know, like maybe these people in particular, but also everyone's fault.
Right.
And I think I agree with that. I think it was just like, I mean, that's the lesson the movie teaches. I don't know if that's the right lesson to be teaching people, but like, you know, the idea that like the community let down Carrie is, I think, what you take away from that. Even though some of them tried.
Makes sense. Tried, but they didn't try hard enough, or they didn't try in the right way, or they slapped around a bunch of students instead of, you know, putting actual consequences in place.
That would have been
the
great.
The principal did literally nothing except for being, you know, irrationally uncomfortable around the period blood.
And saying her name wrong.
And saying her name wrong. So there, he was electrocuted.
Oh, too bad, so sad.
Too bad.
But yes, one more thing. Do you have a one more thing? Even though we're kind of out of time.
Yes. Okay. My one more thing is, as terrible as it is, I kind of love that moment close to the beginning of the movie where Carrie is going home from school after that awful day and has rediscovered her telekinetic powers. And that boy bikes by her and is like, creepy Carrie. And she just like whips his bike out from underneath him. I was like, yeah, get him. Because, you know, like he fell on the grass. He was fine. But also, yeah, get him, you know?
Yeah. No, it's exactly what we were talking about. It's always
that's
get
exactly
him.
what we were talking about. And I think that was the first instance in the movie where that like music kind of comes in all of a sudden.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
So it was a great little moment.
I really liked that that she liked Tommy's poem, and then Tommy stood up for her in class.
And that the poem was plagiarized at the end of the day.
And it was plagiarized because of course it was. Look, Tommy is a good kid. He's not the best student.
No.
But he's a good kid.
Like, he's not going to bully you. He's going to show a girl a good time at prom. And he's going to plagiarize his poetry.
It's exactly what he's going to do. Good old Tommy. Oh, by the way, did you know that Tommy just, like, dies on that stage from getting hit in the head with that pail? Like, he's dead when he hits the stage. I feel so bad for him, though, because it's like death by pail. Like,
yeah, I know. I mean, I guess that's better than some of the other character deaths. You know, like, I think Chris and Billy probably had the most painful of the deaths, which they deserved.
Car explosion, yes.
Yeah, car explosion. Electrocution certainly isn't a comfortable way to go, you know? So all things considered, Tommy was knocked out. He didn't feel anything.
Very true.
Okay. Well, there we go.
Yep, that was it.
We did it. We've seen Carrie. We've talked about Carrie. I've seen Carrie. And I'm going to, it's off the bucket list now.
Yeah, there it is.
I can't wait until our next cinematic adventure.
We'll have to figure out what it is. It might be a skyscraper. We keep talking about doing skyscraper.
Oh,
we may do
haven't seen that one. Surprise. Okay. Well, between now and then, we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can answer the question, what was the theme of your senior prom? You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/BachPod.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.